And thank you to Cheryl for the introduction. The best part of everything you said was that there's simple evaluation techniques. Like, we don't need to be rocket science. And we're excited to share the next 4 years with you and talking about evaluation. And what we'd like to do today is just really say hi, so you can get to put faces on emails, and talk a little bit about the project we've developed and particularly what this next year is going to look like. And because a lot of it is going to involve engagement with you and commitments from you. So I'm going to share and I apologize, I have to work at home today and I've got a very large dog that's snoring. So if you can hear snoring, I promise you I'm not sleeping. It's my Saint Bernard. But I'm going to start. I have to do it this way. There we go. So this is our project. We called it the Buddy Project because every project should have a name. And the term Buddy stands for Building Utilization-Focused Developmental Evaluation Skills. And just a little bit about each of those words. For us, utilization is really important. We often get brought into projects because of federal funding, and then you need an external evaluator. And so, you know, we can be a checkbox, but it really feels like a waste of resources. So for us, if the evaluation is not useful to you, it's really not useful. We can make the most prettiest books that sit on a bookshelf, but we really want to focus on only doing what would be useful. Sometimes we do have funding requirements and we have to meet those funding requirements, and we need to count things and report on them, and we do that. And we try and make even that data, we try and make it as useful as possible. And if you are counting things and you have to report on it, how can you use that in a way that's useful? So that's really the utilization focus is a really important principle for us. The other part is talking a little bit about skills. Actually, the first day I met Cheryl, we spoke about this and the difference between evaluative thinking and evaluation skills. And as we talk about the Buddy Project, I'm hoping you'll see the difference between them, because they are different. And not everybody wants to be an evaluator. In fact, there's not a lot of people who want to spend their day being an evaluator. And we completely respect that you in your job, because you're doing what you need to do and you don't need to become an evaluator in addition to that. So it's really, how do we integrate being an evaluative thinking and skills within your position and within your work. This is our team. We try and do both quantitative and qualitative. As Cheryl was saying, my own personal skill set is more in the qualitative, but we do have quantitative people. One of the people who've on this call is Gabby, and she's actually the blank circle in the middle there without a face, because Gabby joined us like 2 weeks ago. And I'm actually going to stop sharing and just ask Michelle and Gabby if you can just introduce yourselves.
Sure, I can jump in. I'm Michelle Muncie. I'm the other Michelle at PFH. Michelle will try to convince you that I'm the better of the two Michelles, and I don't think that that's true. But you do have the power of two Michelles behind this project. I'm an evaluation manager, and I think I've seen some of your faces before, as Cheryl said, when Michelle and I joined one of your previous meetings in November to present on a policy change evaluation framework. So it's nice to see you.
And before we move to Gabby, Michelle Munzi is going to be your point person. So we will send the slides out. Cheryl, if we can work with you maybe to send a copy of them out, and you'll have Michelle Munzi's email address and contact details. And so if you reach out to her, she'll either answer your question or direct you where the best to the best person to answer your question. Gabby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby Tilton, and as Michelle mentioned, I am new here. I think I'm on my second or third week, so still very new, but I am a program evaluator for Partnerships for Health, and I'm going to be assisting in the back on this project, so you won't see me as much, but I will be helping with it as well. It's nice to see all you.
And one of the big assets that Gabby brings is she's been working in the community and having to do the reporting. And so she is a great perspective to be like, how much is too much and when is it a burden and when is it useful? So she's kind of a thermometer for when we get too excited about evaluation and want to ask people to do 5,000 different things. So thank you, Gabby. So our buddy project consists of two distinct emphasis, and they move in parallel, but the one is looking at organizational capacity and evaluation capacity. And this is as an organization. So as a council, what is your capacity to engage in evaluation? I'm not sure of the individual councils, but sometimes we work with organizations that are 2 people, and they would have a different capacity than an organization that starts with 50 people. Organizations that are embedded within universities or health systems have different capacities than those that are standalone nonprofits or different legal entities. So, but regardless of the structure and your capacity, there's things you can do to increase organizational capacity in terms of for evaluation. One of the things we found has been really easy and simple and budget neutral or budget zero is to have a template that you collect success stories with from grantees, or get into the habit of once every 3 months you sit as 2 people and you figure out if we had to create a success story, what would that look like, and putting that into a routine that increases your evaluation capacity. So at any point, if you're writing for grants or you have to make a presentation, you can go back and you can look at the success stories, and there's so much richness in that. So those are the kind of things we can look at with evaluation organizational capacity. What we want to do is we have 3 strategies. The one is to do an assessment following a continuous quality improvement paradigm. So doing like a plan, study, act, do, plan, study, act. And this probably goes in a different way, but being able to use an assessment as a self-assessment as an organization to say, okay, where are we now? Where do we want to be? And repeating that, we would like to repeat that at least 3 times, or complete it at least 3 times between now and 2026. We also going to take the results from the organizational assessments and develop a curriculum for Project ECHO. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then we'll also, over time, we're hoping to generate like a library of materials and resources. So if we're successful in doing all of those, we hope that those are going to increase the awareness just from individual councils on the impact that your culture and structure has. Just getting the organization to look at the organizational structure through the lens of an evaluation or evaluation activities. We also hope that through those strategies, there'll be an increased knowledge for ways in which you can increase capacity. And then at the end of the 4 years, you'll be able to implement at least one quality plan, do, study, act, or quality improvement activity. If we get all of this right, we hope that there'll be structural and systematic changes at a level, at a grantee organizational level. So that's the organizational level. We also want to focus on the individual evaluation competencies. And it's a very similar approach, but it's what we're looking at is individuals. So it could be multiple people from one organization or one council, where we would look at overall where are people's strengths, where some opportunities for training and technical assistance, provide that technical assistance through Project ECHO and over time develop materials. So similar to what we're hoping for on an organizational level, we're hoping on an individual level that, and this won't be everybody. So if you take all the councils and you take all the staff, and they'd say in total that's 1,000 people. This won't be all 1,000 people. It will be people who are working on evaluation or doing the reporting. So it's a subgroup of everybody. And we hope that that group of people will increase their individual competencies and confidence. A lot of times people know what to do. It can be quite intimidating when someone says, well, can you do a thematic analysis, or I don't know, do some strange statistical analysis. So just really also having the confidence that meeting notes are a really good data source, and having the confidence that you can do an analysis of meeting notes. We hope that you'll also gain knowledge of evaluation theories, frameworks, approaches. And I would say it's a working knowledge. So, we have a whole lot of frameworks that we use for different projects, and every time we do it, we're actually doing it this morning. We think of something, we're busy planning, and then we go back and we look at the framework or the theory. So you don't have to memorize theories, but just knowing they exist and knowing where to find them, so that if there is a project that's like, oh, this sounds like it could be a trans-theoretical theory of change, you can go and look at that. And there's a lot of people who've put so much resources and effort and time and thinking into these frameworks. They really are very useful. And then we also hope that you'll be able to implement at least one evaluation activity in the state plan. So if we're successful for all of that, the goal is to increase personal evaluation skills and confidences. So if we get the systems right and the individual right together, that's gonna, we hope, lead to a sustainable organizational structure, increase capacity, be more effective with evaluation activities. Part of this is learning. They're not cheats, they're just like working smart and easy ways of doing things. And so that when you have to do a report at the end of the year, you don't have to suddenly go shifting through everything, looking on emails. So the effectiveness and the efficiency. Ultimately, our goals are that you're able to engage in continuous quality improvement and data-driven decisions. It's the whole reason we do evaluation. We don't do evaluation to create knowledge. We do evaluation to improve the work we're doing and to drive decision-making. We also hope that ultimately you're able to articulate and communicate your own effectiveness and value, because again, that's the primary purpose of evaluation, is allowing us to tell our story in a way that is credible. Depending on the target audience, people can see it as a unique story, but also very impactful story that is more than emotive narratives. So that's our overall big picture. In terms of how we're going to do that, we're going to be initially doing this assessment, which I'll come to in a few moments, using the results of the assessments to develop a curriculum. And once we have the curriculum, using the Project ECHO model as a way of providing technical assistance. And throughout, from the fall 2020 to 2026, we'll be collecting resources, materials. Some of them will develop as part of the Project ECHO, some may already be developed, and those will all live on the ITAC website as a resource to everyone. Actually, before I get to the assessments, I'm going to briefly talk about Project ECHO. A lot of people know Project ECHO now. There's a very specific structure on Project ECHO, and it's based on a lot of principles. And part of it is a typical ECHO session. You'll have 15 minutes of didactic presentations, kind of like what I'm doing now. And then the rest of the time, which is normally about 45 minutes to an hour, is spent looking at each participant or a few participants' evaluation work. And so it could be that we talk about one of the topics for Project ECHO could be survey development. And so we would do a didactic learning on survey development, and then people would present surveys that they're either in the middle of doing or one they've done, but it hasn't quite given them the results they needed. And we'll all work together. So it's kind of like a peer consulting model. It's been shown to be really effective. And the reason we really use Project ECHO where we can is it's based on two assumptions. One is those that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but furthest away from the resources and power to actually implement change. And second, and it kind of leads on from the first, is we know even, our world's is evaluation, but your world's is developmental disabilities. And you have more answers than what we would ever have. And so it's also been able to harvest and leverage peer knowledge and experience, which is as valuable, if not more valuable, than evaluative experience. So we're going to do two assessments. And I also want to say, like, we will always tell you beforehand of what surveys we do or what evaluations we do. Whenever we first start working with community organizations, they're always nervous because evaluators have a very bad reputation of saying, we're only going to do this one survey. And 9 months later, they're like, oh, but can you just do this one? And then 6 months later, they're like, can you do one more? We will be doing two types of evaluations. We'll be doing the evaluation assessment, which is what we'll start with. And then when we do Project ECHO, at the end of each Project ECHO, we'll just do a short survey to see what people's thoughts were around that Project ECHO session. And that's just so that we can make sure that our technical assistance is appropriate. So those are the only two evaluations we will be doing. So we're going to start with doing the organizational capacity assessment and the individual capacity. round about the beginning of May, you'll receive both, well, you'll receive at least one of these surveys. The organizational capacity, we ask in that one assessment gets completed per council. You can do this either just one person can sit and complete it. You can do it as a group and complete it together. Whatever works for you, but we will only ask you for one complete survey per council. That survey will have the council's name on it. And we're doing that because we think it's really valuable to be able to document change over time on an organizational level. But as an organization, your results are confidential to the evaluation team. They don't get shared with ITAC. They don't get used for anything that is not evaluation for us to assess impact of the buddy project. That's different from the individual competencies assessment, which will also go out at the same time. We'll ask that at least one staff member per council completes the survey. And this will typically be someone whose responsibilities include evaluation, monitoring, reporting. Both surveys will be electronic. There probably will be SurveyMonkey, and these will be anonymous. We will not be asking people's names, and we will be using the results in an aggregate to really identify where the areas that would be most beneficial to most councils or most people participating. So that's a lot of talking from me. I'm going to stop sharing and just ask for any questions, comments. Cheryl, did I leave out anything? Michelle, Gabby, is there anything?
I think you've left anything out, not from my perspective.
Perfect. I see Jackie has their hand up. Jackie, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It was really a wonderful presentation. And I know you mentioned, which I think is a great recommendation of kind of making, collecting impact stories as simple as possible and having like a template. And I was just wondering if there is a template that would, that you might be willing to share, because, that would definitely be very helpful. So thank you.
Absolutely. We actually have a handbook that we developed that we can, Cheryl, we can include it maybe with the slides. And I also just wanted, Jackie, thank you also for that question, because we've been doing this for 20 years. We have a lot of tools. And so those kind of requests are really helpful for us, because we won't always have the tools, but sometimes, like the success story, we have a ready-made tool. That's an easy share. So please always, if you think of something or you're about to do something, outside of this meeting, and you're like, oh, I wonder if they've got anything, or if this tool exists, email Michelle Munzi, because if it exists and we know about it, we'll be very happy to share. I think I saw someone else unmute, but I'm not sure. And you might just need to talk, because I have two screens. So,
well, hey, I'll go ahead and talk. My name's Alicia Cohn. I'm from the Tennessee Council. This is fascinating. I just had one quick question with regard to the individual competencies assessment. It can be more than one staff person that takes that. Is that?
yes,
I just want to make sure I have that correct.
Yes.
Excellent. Because I'm thinking for a council that maybe has a number of people involved in the evaluation process and also different levels of comfort with different types of evaluation, it might paint a better picture if you had more than just one person. So that's great. Thank you.
The surveys, I think there's 20 questions, right? There's around 20 questions on the survey.
Yep.
I think that would probably take about 15 minutes. And I would encourage as many people as possible to complete it, because as you were just saying, the more people we completed, the more accurate reflection we have of where the skill sets are and where we can add the most value. So I know there's some amazing evaluators already within the team, and I would encourage people, particularly if you don't feel very confident, to please complete the survey.
This is Craig Knutson with the Kansas Council on Developmental Disabilities. And I have a couple questions regarding ultimate outcomes of this project. I think, let me preface everything I say by saying I think this is fascinating and I think is really, really, really needed. But one of the things I was wondering is, are we looking for greater efficiencies and uniformity in evaluations within individual councils? Are we looking at greater efficiencies and uniformity in evaluations across councils, that our performance reports are more easily digested by our reviewers? And given the timeline that you posted, that the project wraps up in 2026, that coincides with the last year of our current 5-year planning cycle. Are we looking at potentially taking the lessons learned and perhaps developing or fine-tuning our PPRs that, which are basically our internal evaluations that we submit to our federal funders? So
yeah, those are some great questions, and I can give you one answer, and I want to preface it by one of the things that I left out when I was talking was, we're going to be doing the assessments in May, and then in around August, I believe we're going to all come together and we're going to talk about how we define success. So Craig, I can give you my definition of what I'm thinking right now, but that's just the starting point. I think what's really important is, as a group of councils, we define success, so ideally I would like efficiencies to be on both within the council and between councils. I honestly have never thought of uniformity. That wasn't part of our thinking, but it's a great point, and that's where I'm looking forward to August, when we can present the results back to you and say, as a group, is uniformity something that would be important, that would be a measure of success for this project? So that's just I feel like a politician by not answering the question in full. I'm not a politician, but that I'm really hoping that as a group we can define success. Anastasia, before I go to you, I just wanted to check with Cheryl. Some of that was technical, and so I didn't know if you wanted to answer anything, any of Craig's questions about the PPR.
Craig, I don't think our initial focus is anything related to making everybody report the same type of information, because the way, the federal government can't, although they can structure forms and stuff like that, they can't really dictate how somebody does something. So you will still have your, local council culture influencing what it is you report, what you guys feel is important. Our big focus is really on that capacity building aspect and giving you more knowledge, more tools, or more confidence to then prepare and develop reports that help you shine. So, the request from the feds with this piece of our funding was not about, there was no discussion about how we can get everybody to do something similar. So,
well, I guess my question was, and maybe I didn't clarify. We talked. Michelle talked a lot about efficiencies, and one of the concerns that's been raised by quite a few people is that there's a lot of redundancies in the current PPR, and I didn't know if when we're talking about efficiencies, if we're looking at some of those redundancies that if those would be addressed. And so I didn't know if this would be an opportunity to improve the tools that we use to report, utilizing, different evaluation frameworks and things like that. No, I didn't want the council to report the same thing.
No, but I think it's,
No, we're all very unique.
the when we've worked on multiple grantees, right, like 50 different grantees all reporting and trying to evaluate, what we have been able to do is provide recommendations. And that might be something we want to consider, that there's going to be a lot of information and knowledge that's gained over the next 4 years. And I've never had anyone that hasn't been happy to have recommendations from grantees. So I think that's maybe where we can aim for. And sometimes it's a dance between, if you tell too much unique individual grantee level stories, you don't have, it dilutes the overall impact. And so I don't like uniformity, but I also see the benefits of having something that you can show the overall, if that's important. I think those are really good points to talk about in August. But thank you for clarifying, Craig, and correcting us for thinking that you want a uniform data
I come
evaluation.
from a qualitative research background, so this is like music to my ears. I love this.
Wonderful. Anastasia, can we come to you?
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for taking my question. So I have two, actually. I was wondering how frequently the work group will be meeting. And then my second question is, are the training topics pre-selected, or will they be developed as a result of the assessments?
Yeah, great questions. The training topics will be developed as a result of the assessments. What we're hoping for in August, and that's why we just need a little bit of time. And I keep saying August, I'm not actually sure if it is August, but it's in the summer. We hope at that meeting that we'll present the results to you from the organizational and the individual, and say, based on this is what we recommend the curriculum is for the Project ECHO for 1 year. And I believe that we're aiming to do the Project ECHOs every 2 months. So it would be 1 hour every 2 months. And in our experience, it's really important for people to know what we're going to be covering, because I don't know everyone, but Craig was just saying that he's quantitative. So if we're doing quantitative evaluation, qualitative, sorry, not numbers. If we're doing qualitative analysis, he might be like, I don't need to attend. And so we want to be able to set out the curriculum beforehand so that you can choose what will be the most useful for you.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Other questions?
I don't see any. I have some questions that I was wondering if I could get, would be very helpful, because we have a little bit of time to get your feedback on, which means I have to share my screen again. So just some experience or some reflections. In your experience, you've been doing this work, you've been a professional for a long time. What's worked well in terms of evaluation or building capacity, and what kind of things should we avoid? Also want to know what success would look like for you, and what your council would need to be able to fully participate. So those are the questions. Michelle, would you mind putting them in the chat so that I don't need to share my screen. But really, any advice you have for us in terms of building evaluation capacity, and how we can learn from any mistakes, so we don't have to go and bump our heads as well. And you're welcome to shout out or put it in the chat.
Jackie has put in easy to read materials in plain language. And I will just say, if you're going to use acronyms, spell them out so that everybody's very aware of what they mean.
Yeah, and that's particularly important for us, I would ask, because we come from a public health evaluation perspective, and I know we use the acronym IEP, which I know now means Individual Education Plan, but in our world, it means Individual Evaluation Plan. So we were working with a school, and it took us a while to realize we were talking about complete different acronyms. So that's going to be one of Gabby's jobs, is to be the acronym person, and any terms that we talk about, that she'll help us define them, and we'll have a glossary at the end as one of the materials. So thank you for that.
Nia has her hand raised.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to share I guess I'll say a pitfall that we come across, and that I'd be curious to learn some ideas for navigating around. And that is survey fatigue. And I know you kind of touched on it earlier, just with respect to this evaluation or this Buddies project in and of itself.
Yeah.
But we use surveys a lot because we need to report total numbers. And whenever we do a focus group, we still have to embed surveys within that so that we get a response from every person. And we've just run into challenges with some of our long-standing programs where every year we need to follow up with them, like training programs in particular. And our response rate just keeps going down and down because it's the same questions, because we're trying to get at the performance measures, and it's the same people over time because they're graduates that we want their feedback from. And so just survey fatigue in general, we just haven't been able to figure out a way around that.
Yeah. And when you do figure it out, you should patent it, because you'll become a millionaire. We have some tips and tricks that we can absolutely share. And so I've made a note that is definitely one of the topics we need to cover, because I think that's a reality for everyone. Thank you. Tendra, can I come to you?
I think one of the things for us that worked well is when so I'm kind of looking at this like, and I don't know if this is really how you're looking at it, but it's like a kind of a cross project evaluation. Like we're all coming together to build capacity in this manner. And so I think what has really helped, a couple plans ago, we had a plan evaluation by an entity at Wayne State, and everyone had some indicators that were exactly the same, that we kind of talked about together, every project, be it a grant project or a council activity, and we were all kind of tracking those through that plan. And it really helped us to be able to see what was successful. And I feel like, in August or whenever in the summer, if we're coming together talking about what would success look like, just really identifying like those indicators so that we kind of know that we're on the right track, in that periodic check-in, would just help keep us, like, even though we might not be doing that much, it helps you feel like you're moving towards the goal line.
It's also really important if you're doing a collective impact model, which a lot of organizations do, where you're the backbone, but getting shared measures across different partners. So thank you. I have definitely taken note there. Tally, I think it's pronounced Tally.
Hi, I'm with North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. I think for us, I think all of us find the reporting requirements fairly onerous and sort of not what we would have chosen for evaluation for the feds, but at the same time, that's what's required of us. And so balancing out sort of what we can ask initiatives to do and our own programs to do in terms of evaluation, but having it match up to some degree. So we're not just doing evaluation to actually see what works and is successful, and then adding on top of that all of the stuff that the feds do. I mean, the more that there's some sort of balance between the two, I think the more likely we'll have buy-in and other things. But in the end, I think what we most want to know is what's successful and what's working, but we also don't want to kill our initiatives and just make them just constantly reporting to us, which I feel like we do. We have them fill out a lot of paperwork for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as Cheryl said, I professionally, I grew up in clinical trials, and I worked under this amazing man, Slim, and he always said research or evaluation is the tail, and the tail shouldn't wag the dog. And it's always stuck with me. When we go back to survey fatigue and any evaluation, they should never impact negatively on relationships. And I think you do get to a point where if you're asking people to continuously fill in surveys, you become almost like a salesman, or, some like that people avoid. So I think again, I don't think there's any clear solutions, but I think these would be great topics to discuss and look at. And my guess is that different councils might make different decisions. And in a way, in terms of this project, because it really is around capacity building, I don't know if it's so much that we need to get to a decision, but we need to be able to think about all the different sides to it and what's the pros and cons from each side. And that's what we hope we can kind of usher in. Anastasia, I wasn't sure if you put your hand up or if it was still there. Sorry,
I did actually raise my hand, but you addressed what I was going to ask about in your last statement, because I was going to ask, after going through these work group sessions, and we do find that, okay, if this would be beneficial if ACL will consider changing these measures or adding to these performance measures. I was wondering if that would be one of the goals. I mean, if that would be feasible to do as a result of these organizational change meetings. But the last statement you made just kind of clarify that. So that's why I put my hand down.
Awesome, thank you.
But if there's an opportunity to positively influence or maybe target the performance measures to be more direct, or to really, because sometimes this is what I was finding too, where some of the performance measures are not really accurately measuring the concept or the program activity that it could be because of the wording, or maybe, various things like that. So I was just wondering, before you made your last statement, if as a result of these meetings, these work group meetings that we have, that we find that, hey, look, it would be better if we could recommend a set of, performance changes, maybe the verbiage or the wording, or maybe add some new ones, if that would be possible to do as a result of this meeting, because we're coming as professional contributors to this process, and we want to improve this process. So to me, it would be futile, to put so much planning and efforts and contribution and brainstorming into this process if it just stays siloed into these work groups. So I was just kind of curious, what is the end game or the objectives beyond this work group? Where will these findings go, and how will they positively impact the work that we do in terms of the assessment, fine-tuning the quantitative and qualitative standards and measures we use beyond the work group?
Yeah, thank you. I want to say what my understanding of what this is not, because I think that might be helpful to check out. And this is just honestly my perception. So Cheryl, please feel free if I've got it wrong. This is a great time to correct it. My understanding, this is not a project to evaluate, to come in and say, how effective are the developmental disability councils in the US. That's not the purpose. So we're not doing any evaluation. And I'll just say that, like, sometimes we do a multi-site evaluation. So we have, like, something's been implemented in 30, 40 different sites, and we look at collectively what's the impact. That's not what we're doing. So that's not part of the project. I believe our role is to increase individuals and organizations' ability to do evaluation. We hope you're going to do it, but honestly, like, whether you do it or not, that's not the end result of the project. The project is, has the organization been able to think in terms of evaluative thinking? One of actually the only council we've worked with, but I remember when Nancy, like, looked at the work through a public policy framework, she was able to, that's an evaluation framework, but it was able to inform a lot of her work to me, and they were able to look at it as an organization. Let's adopt this and let's do things, and let's talk to the different council members and use this as a way of explaining things. To me, that's building organizational capacity, because in 6 years' time, that system, if it's effective, will be in place, regardless of what you're doing and who's doing it. So that's, like, on a system level, we're hoping there'll be a change. And then on individual levels, we're just hoping to be able to provide sufficient tools to people and skills, like the survey fatigue, like, on a very practical level. The focus groups, like, we have a way that on registration for focus groups, we get people to fill in their demographics so that we don't have to ask them the questions. So those kind of capacity building tools and techniques is what we're aiming to do. How that relates to the performance measures, I think, is up for discussion. It's definitely, it hasn't come up in any discussions about the performance measures. What I would say is maybe we can look at how to make them more useful and get more utility out of them. And that would be a really good discussion. And if that results in recommendations, I don't think that's a bad thing. And that could be recommendations within each council as well as a collective. So Cheryl, I'm like, this is like a vulnerable moment. Did I get it correct? Because it might be
Yes.
very awkward if I didn't.
No, you're right. Just to remind you guys, the performance measures are set for your entire 5-year plan. They will not change. So knowing that, though, in the spirit of working through building evaluation capacity, we have our knowns. The measures are known. Now we're trying, and we've got to report against them. They're set. However, the whole conversation about recommendations about what would be more effective would be very important going forward into the next 5-year plan, because that then is the time, and timing is everything. And towards the end of this fiscal or this 5-year plan, so, and I can't remember if it's 25, I think it might be in year 2025, that is when the PPR would go back up for Office of Management and Budget approval. And so, there's opportunities to influence. So I think that's what, we'll be doing some things in tandem, participating in this project, listening to where we could potentially make some changes that would then affect your 2027 and forward plan. But the feds are set on measures for this entire 5 years, because they're also dumping all of our data into their data sets, and they can't have measures changing So, I mean, you know, in the big scheme of things, that's the way it looks on the national scene. But I do know that we're getting ready to do, you know, getting ready to look at towards 2025, what really needs to change. And we're very consistent with you guys on the TA side. There's all the duplication and that kind of stuff. But this project is really about your knowledge, your skills, and applying those evaluation techniques to what your state plan is putting in place, and then having you guys be able to, you know, more, and we can call it effectively or efficiently, you know, the burden hours don't need to be all consuming if we have some better strategies and, you know, knowledge about evaluation. Are we collecting everything because we don't know what to evaluate, so everything looks good? Or is there a way to do this more effectively and go after? And that's what our experts are here to really, you know, help us really think through. It doesn't need to be everything. But, and I believe ACL evaluation staff have, you know, those, they have a whole team of experts in their policy and evaluation shop. And that's also what they said. You know, they're very consistent with messaging. You need to be able to position yourself to collect data on what will showcase and demonstrate your impact. And you don't have enough money to measure everything. So that's what we're hoping to get through, more individual and council level. What are your systems? What are your priorities? What is your knowledge? And then let's see where we can improve and enhance.
Michelle, are you going to give us any, so it's one thing for us or for me to, as our grants manager, to increase my capacity. Are we going to learn how to work with our community partners or our grantees? Like,
yeah.
Or are they going to be given the opportunity to come in and learn? So it's one thing for me to learn, but I don't know that I could teach that, like, them how to do it better while I'm learning myself.
And so again, that hasn't come up, but it sounds really exciting. And so I think that's part of when we look at this as a success is how do we, so there were two things, and I think someone else also put it in comments. So thank you for vocalizing it, because I was trying to read through the comments. The doing for you to work with your grantees to do some kind of co-creation of evaluation, enabling, if you help them tell their story, it empowers them, as you know, it increases their sustainability, plus it can be helpful. Be really helpful for you, for your evaluation. So that triangle, I'm blanking on his name. Michelle, who's the man that he's presenting tomorrow?
Fetterman,
Yes,
Michael or David Fetterman.
David Fetterman, it's Michael
Yeah.
Schreider. Yes. So he writes on collaboration evaluation. And it's that triangle, well, probably more like a rhombo or something, but you know, if you get everybody's needs around, so the feds are giving money, they have needs, they want you to do things, you want to do things, your community wants to do things, how can you all minimize effort and maximize results? So, you know, find that like thread that you can weave through and meet everyone's needs. And it's 100% a dance. Like there's no way through, there's no golden solution to that. And because it's so personality driven. I think I can say this. We've worked with some project officers that, and not on this, right? It's a completely different world, that are not very collaborative. And so it's really hard to have that dance. We also can have some community partners that are very suspicious of working with feds, and so kind of having to work. So it's very personality driven. There is community-based participatory action research, and that's what a lot of what we do. And it's different from community-based participatory research because it's built on some very strong principles about co-creation, and they sound very fluffy terms, to be honest, but they're actually really practical and useful in terms of when you look at, people often say, let's work with the community, but then the community ends up doing all the work and having to collect all the data. And so how do you do the division of labor? How do you define what is a good thing to evaluate? So I think that's almost something we could do, a train the trainer. And so we could build your capacity on community-based participatory action research and your confidence to be able to do that with the community. And that maybe is more sustainable than having another session for community partners. Having said that, we have been part of a project that actually brought board members in. And that was really interesting, was we did a workshop with board members around evaluation thinking. So we get to do whatever we want to do. And so that's the cool thing. Like, I really, like, it's a privilege to have such a blank slate that I honestly, like, we can be driven by your needs and where we could add the most value. So my last 15 seconds, answer the surveys, because that's how we get the input, and put everything down on the survey so that we can have the data to drive the decisions. We can add, when we send things around, there's this great primer on community-based participatory action research that we can send along as well. It's a short read, but it's really good for community work.
I will save the chat with some of the comments about pitfalls, what's been successful. Thank you guys for joining us today. I want to give you a plug for the session on TA Institute session on May the 12th. It is the later afternoon session. And I don't have the time in front of me, so I'm afraid to say something that would be wrong. But you will have I believe the surveys will have rolled out. We know that you will have questions. You probably want to explore some of the stuff being asked. So we will have another a good 45 minutes with Michelle and her team from Partnerships for Health live to really look at the assessments, and then again walk us through what happens when your information comes in. Remember, it's not going to be shared with anybody. It is confidential on the organization side and anonymous on the individual side. So you have some confidence there. And then the next steps, what happens after they assess the assessments and bringing us all back together so you guys will know what the information, what you provided, and how that then will translate into some priorities for what will happen in the fall going forward. I hope I said that okay. So thank you for your time today. We will send out slides. We will send out the additional resources you talked about. And if you guys want to continue putting stuff in the chat box, I will leave this open until everybody signs off, and then I will save the chat and make it available to you guys over at Partnerships for Health and anybody else who wants it. Just let me know. So thank you so much.